Waiting. Did it just go live, Ned?
Yes, it did go live, Jason.
It says live, but I don't. Can we trust it, Ned?
I think so.
Are you sure, Ned?
For the last 44 episodes, when it went live, it was actually live. So
yeah, but that's just 44 times, Ned. I don't know.
Well, let's run with the intro anyway. Okay. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 45 of the TechForge podcast. I am your host, Dynamo Ned, and I am joined by my two ever faithful co-hosts, Jason and Hunter.
Hey.
And we may have a fourth joining us, assuming he can get his setup to work.
Yeah, you see, there's this whole thing about, you got to hook up the webcam, and sometimes it's really hard to hook up the webcam. So
sometimes the drivers don't work right, and
yeah.
And if I'm slow
it's a hard life,
I've got my webcam at home in a hurry.
It happens. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll get through it.
Anyway, so Computex is over. We talked about that in the last podcast. But also, Apple's WWDC just happened. And, well, there was a lot of Apple stuff announced, most of which doesn't really concern us on this particular program because we generally don't do a whole lot in the mobile space with iPads and iPhones and the like. Although there is some interesting things about iOS 13 and the iPad finally getting its own customized version of iOS. Still, we'll start by addressing some of the things that happened at WWDC this year.
Okay.
And in particular, we're going to focus, because this is a computer hardware podcast, on the new Mac Pro that was announced. The new Mac Pro has some very interesting specifications, but let's talk briefly about quickly go over the key things that were announced at the WWDC keynote. They opened up with, I'm basing this from information from a link to an article on Engadget. Of course, we will have links down in the description below to all of the articles that we are discussing in today's podcast. This first one is from Engadget, and it's, well, all the important stuff from Apple's WWDC keynote. In particular, they talk about the latest version of Apple Watch OS, Apple Watch OS 6. The Apple Watch apparently is getting its own app store for the first time.
Sweet.
You'll be able to pick a wide array of new faces for your Apple Watch, and is going to include new advanced health and fitness tracking features.
Fantastic, Ned.
Apple TV is getting an upgrade with its own operating system that they're now calling tvOS. Yes, tvOS. tvOS.
I've heard that somewhere before. Sounds oddly familiar.
Well, a couple of interesting things that are being added to the Apple TV. It will now support both Xbox One and PlayStation 4 controllers for input methods. Music you play on your Apple TV will now include an option to view lyrics for karaoke-style sing-alongs. And the first trailer for the Apple TV Plus series For All Mankind, directed by Seth Gordon, was also shown off at the keynote. Let's see, what else? OS. Oh, excuse me. iOS 13. And so, this, of course, is going to be the latest version of the iPhone's operating system. It's supposed to be faster and more efficient. They claim that it updates to apps will be 60% smaller, and that unlocking through Face ID will be 30% faster. And they finally caught up with Android. They implemented a dark mode.
Sweet.
New and improved Maps app. If you just use Google Maps, you might fix that problem. A new sign-in with Apple feature. I'm getting an echo.
You are? That's fantastic, Ned.
Let's see, where were we?
I think you stopped at iPad OS, maybe?
Or iOS 13. Okay.
Yeah.
So apparently they're getting emojis improved and they're supposed to be more personal.
We need emojis, man.
Yeah,
They always
personalized.
need to be super personal, Mr. Ned.
Well, Windows 10 is gotten emojis already.
But they call them Apple's Memoji? Is that like a meme
Yeah.
OG?
Yeah.
Probably.
They're supposed to be kind of the sequel to iMessage stickers.
Oh, dude. It includes makeup and jewelry and accessories.
Let's see, what else? Okay. Apple announced some new features for HomeKit, which is their kind of home automation security suite. They want to increase the privacy of security camera footage with the new HomeKit Secure Video and HomeKit for routers. HomeKit for Secure Video will encrypt video feeds and store it in your iCloud, while HomeKit for routers will create a virtual firewall between your network and any devices on the network.
Sweet.
Siri gets some updates as well. New shortcuts. iPad OS. iPad is finally getting its own version of the iOS. Improved home screen, allowing more displays, more apps to be displayed, excuse me. The slide over feature that lets you swipe between multiple apps will finally be added to the iPad, much like it is on the iPhone. And Safari is now a, quote, desktop class browser that won't default to showing mobile views of websites. But that brings us to probably the thing that most concerns us and the thing that we're most interested in here on this show, which is the Mac Pro. Now, the 2019 Mac Pro, in case you haven't seen it yet, is, well, it is kind of a throwback. Let me see if I can get this photo shared. Yeah, there we go. All right, so this is the 2019 Mac Pro. If that looks suspiciously like a cheese grater, it's because this is a throwback to the cheese grater Mac G5 from the early 2000s.
Yep.
Ah.
Except that one, I would say, looked better.
Well, I'm not gonna lie, it is a very sexy looking cheese grater case, man.
I mean, it's very.
If it just had a different front grille, it is a very sexy looking case.
Yeah, I understand what they were going for. They were wanting to do ventilation and have better airflow, especially after the disaster that was the 2013 trash can Mac Pro that thermal throttled terribly due to its terrible airflow.
Yep.
What? Max thermal throttle? What?
And so they decided to bring back the cheese grater design. And so, unfortunately, they didn't talk a lot about pricing, except for a couple of pieces that I gotta say, we talk a lot about on this program about the Apple tax.
Yep.
And how with Apple, you're not really paying for the hardware, you're paying for the brand.
Yes.
And the Mac Pro makes that very evident. The base model of the Mac Pro is going to contain an 8-core Intel Xeon CPU running at 3.5 gigahertz with 8 cores, 16 threads. We'll have 32 gigabytes of DDR4 2666 memory, a 256 gigabyte solid-state drive, and a Radeon Pro 580X graphics card.
So,
and well,
yeah.
Before we start the rant, because I know there's a rant coming, you can get all of that lovely hardware for $5,999 USD. That's right.
But it doesn't stop there. There's
and
more.
That's the base model. But
So go ahead.
You can also get a 32-inch 6K Retina display for $4,999 on top of the $6,000 you already spent.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, and don't forget the fact that they've got a monitor stand that costs $1,000.
Yes.
If you
want the Pro display stand for your Retina monitor, it's $999, even though it's just a solid piece of aluminum.
And I'm sure you could retrofit or mod that to fit a different type of monitor too.
If you think that's a ripoff, then if you want to have just a standard VESA mount to put on the back of your monitor, because you have your own monitor arms already, that's going to cost you $199.
Oh my gosh.
So the total of the monitor, the base model desktop, and the
I don't
stand,
have to say anything. I don't have to rant because the price just rants on its own.
So anyway, continue, Hunter.
So
I can't hear Hunter.
I had my rant already about this, and I feel like just saying.
Is Hunter talking?
He is.
I can't hear him.
If people want to...
Let me disconnect and...
All right. Go ahead, Hunter. I think Jason had to reconnect.
If people want to spend the money on that, that's up to them. I think you can have the same or better computer, even a Hackintosh, for half the price. The thing about it is that I think the 8-core 16-thread Xeon by itself is $3,000, but the rest of the components can't equal $3,000.
No, Hunter. Hunter, the Xeon in that thing is $1,100.
Oh, I thought it was $3,000.
No, it's $1,100.
So, are they charging like $1,500 for build price?
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like they may be charging more than that. I mean, we all know that an RX 580 is $180. I would imagine that the Pro variant is probably $250 to $300.
Yeah,
so even, I'll throw them a bone and say that maybe the components cost around $2,000.
Well, what I heard is the RAM for the base model is 32 gigs of 2666.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't have. That would be like, I don't know, maybe 600 or less.
Yeah, and it's got a 256 gig SSD,
which is a boot drive for anybody else.
Uh-huh.
I mean, even
if the NVMe SSD 256 gigabytes, you can easily buy those all day long for $60 to $80.
Yeah.
That's on the high end.
So a Ryzen build, a comparable Ryzen 2700X build would set you back about $1,000 with a nice case and cooling system.
So at the I think my settled down rant is people, of course, are paying for the brand. They're paying for the quote unquote best software, I guess. The hardware's pretty much definitely not. I don't understand how they can charge $1,000 for a monitor stand. It's just like one piece of metal or two pieces of metal.
Well, the thing with Apple you have to always understand is that it's always about the margin with them. It is always about making sure they make their margin.
Their margin's around 100 to 150%, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
And people are going to buy Apple because, one, it's Apple, and two, the quality of, I mean, people say, like, I have my Mac MacBook 2013 for 10 years and it never had a problem.
They'll buy it for one of two reasons: either the tooling / software on the platform, or because they're Apple fans, or both.
Right. Yeah, that's evident with the people standing in line for the newest iPhone when they're perfectly fine. Last gen iPhone has no issues.
There is nothing that Xeon gives you over a 9900K or a 2700 or a 2700X other than ECC memory.
Exactly.
That is it. I mean, even if you were to price up a 9900K system, that's still well below $6,000.
Yeah.
I mean, just very recently, one of my favorite YouTube channels to follow, Tech Deals, he put together what he called his Cadillac build with the 9900K. It was still only around $3,000, and the specs were significantly better than this.
I'm guessing he had a 2080 Ti and
RTX 2080 Ti, 9900K, 64 gigs of RAM.
Well, the one interesting thing about the highest model of the Mac Pro desktop is 1.5 terabytes of hexa channel RAM.
That's the top end. That's the top end build, but then
I think it's combined total of 45,000.
It's expected. Yeah, it's expected to cost around 45K.
Yeah, according to TechSpot, they went to several other of their sources and they priced out what the individual components would be. The ECC memory alone, that 1.5 terabytes of it, $17,867. That's just RAM.
Right. That 28 core Xeon's pretty pricey too, man.
Well, I mean, movie studios may have a budget for $500,000 for a couple of those highest high-end Mac Pro desktops.
And if you're going to move up to the high-end 28-core 56-thread model that they advertise on Apple's website, the cost for that CPU is $7,453, and that's before the Apple tax is applied.
Interesting.
We don't have any pricing yet on the Radeon Pro Vega 2 Duo cards.
So that's about the only thing out of this entire build, other than the fact that I do kind of like the case, minus the cheese cut in front of it, whatever. That's about the only thing I think that's kind of cool, is that dual Radeon 7 based card.
You can have two of them. You can have quad Vega 2s.
Yep.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about the Vega 2 Pro Duo in a little bit, but the other interesting thing, and the one thing that catches my attention for all of this, is AMD adding in what they call their Afterburner Accelerator card. Now, that's the one thing that I think might give the Mac its edge. This accelerator card is supposed to be handle up to 3 8K raw video streams at the same time.
Or 12, what was it, 12 4K?
Yeah, or up to 12 4K. That's pretty insane when you consider the throughput in average 4K video.
Which I wonder if that's where they're kind of going with what the use case is for this particular workstation design.
I mean,
but you're going to be able to go to competitors like IBM or Acer that have content creation model stacks, and they've all got very powerful graphics subsystems and capture cards and multi or lots of threads that they can process, lots of RAM, lots of SSDs for a fraction of the price here. So And those are all professionally created and designed and engineered workstations. So, but the majority of those are using I want to say Ryzen Pro, Threadripper, and there are some that use Intel HEDT as well. So I don't know, man. I really thought a lot about this today, and I'm left still wondering what is the targeted demographic for this workstation.
I mean, the one use case you might have is if you're a Mac shop and you're a Final Cut Pro house where you exclusively use Final Cut Pro or the utilities that are only on a Mac, then perhaps you have a use case. But that seems really niche to me.
So there's some broadcasting or content creation workloads. It looks like this thing's capable of executing at a very good level. But at what point do you say the price is too much? I mean, I would think that like a Linus Tech Tips or Jay's 2 Cents would be about the size of a channel that would probably buy something like this. But then you're cutting off such a large demographic of users. Because how many Jay's 2 Cents or Linus Tech Tip channels are out there?
Right. And I don't think it's going to be the average prosumer that's going to be buying these. This is clearly aimed at the professional market. And I think you're probably going to see this more in, high-end video production houses or audio-visual production or, high-end music development or... I mean, this is obviously something that the average person is not going to be buying to view Facebook on.
One different thing that they did, the keynote speaker did talk about this. It's upgradable. So for the first time ever I could think of, Mac is fully upgradable. Maybe not fully upgradable, but at least more so than they have been in the past.
Yes,
Because previously the iMac has been like you can switch out the RAM or upgrade the RAM and maybe a hard drive, but that's it. I don't know about the trash can Mac Pro and what was actually upgradable in that.
With the trash can, it was pretty much RAM and certain storage devices. But yes, they have returned to the somewhat modular design of the G5s from a number of years ago. And that's not a bad thing.
No. It's not. The price is the bad thing.
Yeah. So now what I'd like to do, obviously Apple doesn't have their pricing out there yet, but they do have the technical specs page up for the Mac Pro. So I thought we could take a scroll through that real quick and see what, maybe we can see or discover what's interesting with this.
Okay.
So here's the technical specs page for the Apple Mac Pro. And they detail, processor. They got it highlighted. Configure from an 8-core to a 28-core Intel Xeon W processor. Now, for reference, the 8-core 3.5 gigahertz Intel Xeon W with 8 cores and 16 threads that they're talking about here is this part. The Intel Xeon W 3223. An 8-core 16-thread part with 3.5 gigahertz base and 4.0 gigahertz boost processing or turbo processing frequency.
Which isn't a bad processor by any stretch of the means, but it's $1,100, $1,200 somewhere in there. So I mean,
So next step up is a 12-core 24-thread Xeon with a base clock of 3.3 gigahertz. I forgot to include the back button to show off all the rest of these, but all of these are actually listed on Intel's ARC site, where they keep specifications of all their current and past processors. Notice the key difference here, though, is you get a turbo boost up to 4.4 gigahertz, almost twice as much, or at least you get 31.25 megabytes of cache versus 24.5, and you get support for DDR4 2933 over 2666. Then you have the 16-core, 32-thread model with 38 megabytes of cache, 3.2 gigahertz base clock, and then you have the 24 and 28 cores, respectively, with their 57 and 66.5 megabytes of cache, respectively.
Woohoo.
All right, and that we have the memory configuration. They have a number of different options. You can have your choice of 32, 48, 96, 192 gigabytes, 384 gigabytes, 768 gigabytes, or 1.5 terabytes of DDR4 RAM.
I have a feeling that 6.8 gig config's probably going to be the most popular.
Right. You have all the slots filled, and you have plenty of room to grow.
Right.
Or you have all the channels filled, and you have room to grow.
Right. Yeah, I can't get too excited about this.
Graphics. We start with the Radeon Pro 580X. For those who aren't aware, the Radeon Pro 580X is basically an RX 580 with certain professional grade features enabled for rendering workloads.
Okay.
It basically performs exactly the same. Again, 36 compute units, 2,304 stream processors, 8 gigs of GDDR5, 5.6 teraflops single precision, yada, yada, yada.
I don't think they realize that that's a mid-range. I mean, it's not for gaming, I know, but it's basically a mid-range GPU. So it's not like,
I'm sure they're aware.
I don't know.
Next, we have Radeon Pro Vega 2. This is basically a Radeon 7, except with all 64 compute units enabled, which actually brings it closer to the Radeon Instinct MI60, but that's neither here nor there.
And twice the RAM.
Yeah, so it does come with 32 gigabytes of HBM2 memory.
The only way it gets that 1 terabyte a second is by having 4 stacks. So this is very much still in the same configuration as a Radeon 7. So interesting.
Yeah, and
next
this
down is the interesting one though.
Yes. So the AMD Radeon Pro Vega 2 Duo. 2 Vega 2 GPUs, each with 64 compute units and 4,096 stream processors. With 64 gigabytes of HBM2 memory, 32 gigabytes per GPU, for up to 28.2 teraflops of single precision, or 56.4 teraflops of half precision calculation power.
So we'll get into it later, but this is a big reason why this particular type of card here is the big reason why AMD is getting a lot of the enterprise and server market share over in NVIDIA right now. Because they're very, very compute heavy for a reasonable price.
And that well, NVIDIA and Apple have never really made up after the problems with the good old G80 processors way back when. Some of you may remember the infamous G80 was a graphics chip that was used in a lot of both Apple and in consumer laptops. I actually still have a laptop. We can drop it now. I actually still have a laptop that has a G80 chip in it. Mine was the GeForce 8400 MS or 8400 GS, excuse me. That, well, they had a reputation for getting so hot that they would desolder themselves from the boards they were soldered to. And this caused a lot of trouble for a lot of people, caused a lot of lawsuits, and it's what caused Apple to drop NVIDIA from their laptops from that point forward.
Well, yeah, because they did this. Wait, you're going to support it. No, you're going to support it. No, I think you should support it. They did that back and forth, and that's how it ended. Not well.
Yeah, there's a reason one of the last GPUs to appear on a MacBook was the 9400M. Or at least one of the last NVIDIA GPUs to appear on a MacBook.
Probably because of that lineup, that was the last that they had planned to buy and designed into that particular laptop SKU.
Yeah, they went with Radeon after that.
Yeah.
All right. So, having covered all the relevant Mac Pro stuff, let's dive into the somewhat related. This is from Tom's Hardware discussing the Radeon Pro Vega 2 and the Pro Vega 2 Duo. So, Tom's Hardware gives us a good close-up picture that I will share real quick.
My God, the VRM on that thing.
So here is the Radeon Pro Vega 2 Duo. You have two Vega dies with their 4 stacks of HBM2. You have massive power phases, tons of capacitors.
Yeah, that's not memory, folks. The memory's around the GPU.
These 4 blocks here, next to the GPU die, those are the HBM2 modules.
Yep.
These are all power delivery.
That's flipping crazy.
Yep.
That PCB is designed to handle a lot more than 500 watts of power.
Notice it comes with Thunderbolt 3.
Yeah.
They have what they call their Infinity Fabric Link connector for up to 5 times faster data transfer. So remember, Infinity Fabric isn't just for CPUs. And you have this interesting MPX connector. Now, MPX basically allows you to go way beyond the PCIe power specification, which allows you to only draw 75 watts of power directly from the PCI slot. What MPX is basically an additional power connector that facilitates the additional 475 watts of power. Because, well, you add that together, that's 550 watts.
So, standard Radeon 7 is spec'd for a 300 watt TDP and peaks at 1700 megahertz. And off of this data sheet, they're saying that the Pro Vega 2 Duo, which are fully enabled GPUs, by the way, also peak at the same megahertz, or the same clock speed. That's interesting.
Well, that would go some ways to explain why you'd have such power draw.
So these are going to be higher bin than the Radeon 7. So they should be a bit more power and thermal friendly, but I can't imagine they'd be that much more power friendly because they're basically stating that this board should be drawing around 500 watts of power. I don't see any external power connectors on this PCB.
Well, one of the things to note the Radeon Instinct MI60 here that they have for comparison. 64 compute units, 4096 stream processors at 1800 megahertz.
Yeah, well, it's a singular card, and they've got it configured to run slightly faster. So
very likely, these are the same bin that we saw for the Radeon Instinct MI60, just slightly detuned.
Right.
So that is the one interesting piece to me of what was announced for the Mac Pro is the Vega 2 Duo.
Right.
Obviously, we'll never see it in the consumer space.
I'm not aware of this card being available to any other. I'm not aware of this card at all. Like, this is the first time hearing of it, and I'm not sure who else would consume this card.
Yeah, I'm not sure at this time if there's anyone in the consumer space who could even find a usage for this card.
I don't know. This very well could be. I mean, Lisa Su is very vendor partner friendly, so that could be specifically designed for this workstation. I don't know. It's a flipping awesome card, though.
Now all we need to do is let Jay from James 2 Cents find a water block, go on GP water block, and put it on there, water cool it. Hopefully inside the cheese grater.
Okay, yeah, I could see that being one hilarious video.
Yeah. Can this be cooler? Is the cheese grater really necessary? That's water cool because he's the water cool king, sort of.
Yeah, but it's specifically for this new PCIe connector.
Yeah.
So you'd need the motherboard as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
See, that's where Apple is really good at the whole vendor lock-in thing, where they introduce proprietary things to make sure that their stuff only works with their stuff.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's a crazy awesome card.
Yeah, I can't wait to see some benchmarks later this fall. But something we'll be seeing a lot sooner are X570 boards. This one was an interesting one to me because most of the time when we think X570, we think big ATX motherboards with 4 RAM slots and room for multiple graphics cards or multiple expansion cards. But no, Gigabyte has unveiled an X570 mini ITX motherboard.
Sweet.
Now, this isn't the first time or even the first manufacturer who's done something like this. I mean, I own a BioStar X370 GTN board, which is a mini ITX X370 board, which, by the way, runs my 1800X just fine. But this is one of the first X570 boards we've seen. And after finding out that the X570 chipset, due to the way its RAID array works, runs a little bit hotter than some of the previous generation ones that almost all of them ship with a fan, I was curious how they were going to pull that off on a mini ITX board. Well, turns out Gigabyte came up with an interesting solution to that.
So you know what the secret monster is about this board? Can you guess?
What do you think it is?
Well, I know what it is. It's the VRM. It's only got a 6-phase plus 2 VRM. However, those 6 phases for the V-Core are more powerful than anything else that has ever debuted for Ryzen.
Here's another
more
view of those
powerful
VRM
than-
phases.
There's 70 amp power stages on the V-Core VRM. That 6-core VRM is more powerful than anything that has come out on X470 or X370. Wait a second. Actually, no, I take that back. It's more powerful than the Asus Strix-F. So there's, gosh darn it. Basically, $200 down in the X470 stack. This is more powerful than any of those boards. I'll just say that.
While being a mini ITX system.
For even the full size.
Well, that was my point. It's a mini ITX system that has better power conditioning than boards literally 4 times its size.
Yeah. To put it in layman's terms, you can run the 16 core on this thing and overclock it and not overheat the VRM. Like the two SoC power stages aren't anything that great. I mean, you can run an APU on this and it'd be all right, but you wouldn't want to be heavily overclocking the APU kind of a thing. But you can run the 16 core on this thing and be just fine. But this thing also is supposed to have an MSRP of $220.
Correct, which is more on the expensive end for a mini ITX board.
Right.
I mean, I picked up my X370 GTN used for about $50. So,
yeah. And I picked up all of my mini ITX Ryzen boards for between $80 to $115. So yeah. So yeah, I don't know. We should be expecting X570 to be more expensive, I think, than what we're probably used to.
Speaking of expensive, the original article here is from Tech Radar, but they link to one from PC Games In. So I'm going to head to there first because the PC Games In article has a bit more information. So basically, there has been a leak on certification for AMD Navi GPUs. And basically what this certification leaked is that there appears to be multiple configurations for the RX 5000 graphics cards. I mean, on the one hand, this isn't terribly, out there. We knew there was going to be, full fat Navi, and there was going to be a smaller cut down Navi, and possibly even a tiny Navi variant, just like we saw with Polaris.
Mm-hmm.
But what is interesting is that according to the South Korean Radio Research Agency, which has to give certification on any device that could admit RF frequencies, covers 5 different Navi variants based on the RDNA graphics silicon. So in the current code, there was noted a D182 designation, as well as a D160/D360 that had been used previously for 7 nanometer Vega 2. But apparently, the D182 variant also has a number of different sub-variations, including a card that is called model D18206 and is derived from models D18205, D18208, D18202, and D18207, indicating that there are at least 5 different models.
So 5 different models. So they're, in that case, they really wouldn't be mirroring what they did with Polaris, because when Polaris came out, the RX 480 was roughly on par, maybe slightly slower than the GTX 980. And if their Computex debut or preview is to be believed, the RX 5700 is offering better performance than RTX 2070, which is the same performance as the Pascal GTX 1080. So I was just thinking they're going to kind of mirror what they did with Polaris, where they're offering a part out there that's as fast as the previous NVIDIA generation's 1080 part or 80 level part. But if what you're saying, they've got 5 different models coming out.
Well, we could be seeing PC Games In suggests that maybe they have a higher spec RX 5800 planned.
That would be interesting. Then that would basically replace the Radeon 7.
Well, yes or no. It depends on whether the RX 5700 is the RX 580 replacement or if it's the RX 570 replacement.
That's true. Well, I don't know, because if they basically said out on stage that the 5700 is supposed to be the 2070 competitor. So with that in mind, with the Radeon 7 basically competing against the 2080, all the rumors are suggesting that this is a hybrid GCN architecture. So it's like, so yes, it is going to be this RDNA architecture, but basically it's a hybrid GCN. And then Navi 20 is expected to come out next year, but be the full RDNA architecture, and be in the high performance stack. So that, I don't know. I honestly have no idea what to expect next week.
Yeah, we will find out more at E3 next week. So stay tuned for that.
I am scared that they're going to release Navi at high price points. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, if they're planning for the the RX 5700 to fight the RTX 2070, then if they release it at a similar price point, I don't know if it's nearly as compelling.
I don't know. I don't think it is, because if they're releasing it at $500, even though it might offer the same performance or 5% better performance, if they're releasing it at $500, I would just rather have the part that's got what are the Turing features?
Ray tracing?
Yeah, I'd rather have the part with ray tracing.
The rumor I read.
And we have no one to blame for those prices except for NVIDIA, honestly.
Yeah.
So I
Go
don't
ahead,
know.
Hunter.
The thing I read on, I forgot what website it was, but it's going to be $100 cheaper than the RTX cards. It's still not where they said it was going to be, because they said the 2060 equivalent was going to be like $250 originally. Now it's going to be like it can't be $350. It had to be $250. It'd be $100
Right.
cheaper.
The original leaks that contained pricing said that, of course, the thing to remember about pricing is always subject to change.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so
if they get into a pricing war and no one's buying the card, I mean, that can only help us out, right? So I don't know.
we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah.
But that's not the only thing AMD had to talk about this week. AMD also entered into a high-profile partnership with, of all people, Samsung to provide high-performance graphics technologies for mobile parts, including apparently part of its RDNA IP. So this comes from AMD Investor Relations. So this is their kind of press release thing. Today, AMD and Samsung Electronics Corporation announced a multi-year strategic partnership in ultra-low power, high-performance mobile graphics IP based on AMD Radeon graphics technologies. As part of the partnership, Samsung will license AMD graphics IP and will focus on advanced graphics technologies and solutions that are critical for enhancing innovation across mobile applications, including smartphones.
This is a brilliant move, man. AMD has to do nothing. They're basically licensing out their tech, and it's up to Samsung to take it, build it, and integrate it into its existing product stacks or new product stacks that they're going to create. So they're basically paying AMD to use their tech. AMD doesn't have to do anything. And then now you'll see AMD tech in who knows what kind of applications. I mean, we can only assume that it'll be smartphone, tablet, potentially some lower end laptops, maybe even.
Yeah, they mention in this press release that the key terms of the partnership include AMD will license custom graphics IP based on the recently announced highly scalable RDNA graphics architecture to Samsung for use in mobile devices, including smartphones and other products that complement AMD product offerings. While Samsung will pay AMD technology license fees and royalties.
The year of AMD, man, I'm telling you. 2019.
But yeah, we could see things become really interesting in the mobile space with... this is actually not the first time AMD has done this. If you're familiar with the Adreno GPUs that are commonly used in a lot of Qualcomm chips, Adreno is an anagram of Radeon and is based on a very old version at this point of the Radeon architecture from way back in the Radeon HD 5000 and 6000 days.
So when you look at this holistically, so if you take a few steps back and you look at what's developing, this is the second time AMD is going to be in consoles, right? Except now they're penetrating more of the console market. They've got Google Stadia, they've got both the next gen architectures for Microsoft and Sony. Now they're going to have Samsung devices. They're also competing very heavily now with their 7-nanometer process in the server space, just purely from a GPU perspective. In the server space. Now, who's losing market share for the first time in forever, at least in the last 3 to 4 years? NVIDIA. NVIDIA is losing market share in the enterprise sector. AMD is gaining market share in the enterprise sector. So it kind of looks like AMD is positioning themselves to have game engines and other types of engines and applications optimized for their architecture, which will then eventually spill into the desktop. So NVIDIA has been losing market share, and they've been basically angering all of the enthusiasts out there with their prices. So I kind of fear for NVIDIA here. I don't know I don't know how NVIDIA is going to respond, but AMD is being extremely aggressive with all of these partnerships and all of these markets that they're getting into. Very interesting.
Well, not to be outdone, Intel did have an announcement of their own this week. That's also related to the announcement at WWDC. And that is the release of their Cascade Lake Xeon W3000 series. Now, these are their second generation of Cascade Lake scalable architecture. And so these processors, which we've talked about some a little bit already, are offering up to 28 cores with 64 PCIe lanes and 4.6 gigahertz boost clocks at up to 205 watt TDPs. And so
that's not bad. 205 watt TDP for 28 core at 14 nanometer. That can boost up to 4.6. That's not bad.
Yeah, we've already seen the Previous Enthusiast version of this chip, though. We've talked about in the past the Xeon W3175X and how that one can consume copious amounts of power under load. Apparently, Intel has been binning its chips, and the 3175X is actually not the flagship. It's a new part that they are dubbing the W3275. And the W3275 also features 28 cores and 56 threads, but it has a max clock speed of 4.6 gigahertz boost and 2.5 gigahertz base for an operating TDP of 205 watts.
Well, I mean, all of these parts are going to be very, very heavily binned anyway. So that's still impressive.
So the Xeon W3275 is going to be selling for $4,449 US. So that's not going to be cheap to get 28 cores, 56 threads. Now, admittedly, that's significantly more than the 3175X that's overclockable, but not that much more considering that the 3175X is about $3,500.
I wonder what the ROM pricing is going to be.
That'd be interesting to know, but ROM chips aren't supposed to be out till later this year.
Right.
So I did want to relate this chart. This is from WCCF Tech, but it describes the stack for the Xeon W3000 series. So we have the W3275M at the top, 28 cores, 56 threads, 2.5 gigahertz base, 4.6 gigahertz boost, 205 watt TDP at $7,453. Now, what makes this one different is that this is the version that can handle up to 2 terabytes of DDR4 2933.
Which, this is the top end, I think they're going to put in the new Mac Pro.
Correct.
And then the second from the bottom, the W3225, is the base CPU to expect in the Mac Pro.
Technically, the 3223 is the base in the MacBook, or the Mac Pro, because the Mac Pro uses the 3.5 gigahertz variant.
I was thinking it was the 3225.
Well, if we go back...
Oh, you don't have to go back.
I was going to say, yeah.
Mac Pro anymore.
They stated that their version is going to be at 3.5 gigahertz. So I think it's going to be the 3223.
Well, yeah.
And of course, they also mentioned 12 cores, 16 cores, 24 cores, and 28 cores. in the Mac Pro, and we can see all of those represented here in this stack. So these are almost certainly what we can expect to see in the new Mac Pros. So that was Intel's big announcement. Notice the W3225 is $749. So
the 23, you mean?
Yeah, the that chip is $749, and that's going to be the base model that's in the Mac Pro.
I wonder what the difference is between the M variant of the 3275 and the non-M variant.
Well, like I said a minute ago, it's that the M variant can support up to 2 terabytes of DDR4 2933 in hexachannel mode.
Okay, but that commands a $3,000 difference. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Well, the difference is that the 3275 non-M can only support up to 1 terabyte of DDR4 2933.
Yeah, but I just don't understand how that can command a $3,000 price difference. That's insane.
Probably it required retooling the memory controllers, if I had to guess, but even then.
Wow.
So yeah, that is Cascade Lake.
Okay.
And NVIDIA, we didn't talk about NVIDIA a whole lot in our last podcast because, well, NVIDIA didn't have a lot to show off at Computex. But they teased us with their super lineup that's supposed to be shown at E3 next week. But in the meantime, we have some interesting data. This comes from the Steam's hardware survey. And this article from TechRadar goes over the basics of it. The latest version of the Steam hardware survey is out. And according to TechRadar, NVIDIA turning graphics cards are ever so slowly gaining market share, but their rate of adoption is slowing.
To be honest, I'm surprised that they're gaining any kind of market share at all, considering how expensive they are.
Well, the gains... Go ahead.
Well, I've been seeing people in my gaming or PC enthusiast Facebook groups. A lot of them have been buying the RTX cards, and they like it. So people are buying them because of the benefits that they think that you give them.
Well, the RTX 2060 seems to be leading the pack from a popularity perspective.
Well, it's $350 gets you into RTX.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Not surprising.
It increased the most at an increase of 0.14%, bringing it up to 0.65% of total installs. The most popular RTX 2070, or the most popular RTX card is the RTX 2070, I should say, at 0.91% of the total Steam user base.
Does it show how many of the 10 series is still going on?
Well, funny you should ask that, because the ever-popular GTX 1060 leads the pack as the most installed graphics card at 15.69% of the market.
Well, that's because its price point is still pretty good, and I mean, for the longest time, it was kind of the 1080p king. So,
yeah,
at its price point.
Yep, at its current price point, it's definitely a preferred card.
I don't know if it, how much is it going for right now? I think I can't imagine.
It's around either 180 or 200, I think.
depending on where you can
Last
find
time I
it.
True.
One of the biggest jumps they saw was the GTX 1660 Ti. Although it wasn't the biggest increase, it has already jumped to 0.28% of the market. Mostly because it's one of the cheapest ways you can get into Turing. AMD's leader is the RX 580 still. And so we'll have to see if Navi can shake up that any in the coming months.
Well, we'll have to wait for Monday and see what happens.
Indeed.
If the prices are right, I think there's a lot of people out there waiting on that Navi. Waiting on that presentation and then waiting for reviews to come out. So,
well, NVIDIA is not waiting. There are already rumors of an upcoming RTX 2070 Ti. Of course, we've seen NVIDIA pull this before with the 1070 Ti, which was released specifically to try and counter Vega 56 and the value proposition that it brought. But the RTX 2070 Ti is right now just rumored, but there's already been details leaked about its potential configuration. The current RTX 2070 has 2,304 CUDA cores. The RTX 2070 Ti is expected to be about 10 to 15% faster, with 2,560 CUDA cores and 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 at 14 gigabits per second, and a GPU boost of 1,770 megahertz.
So the CUDA core count's not that much greater. I wonder how it could get up to 15% faster. That's interesting. The 2070 will boost up to about 1950 in regular gaming workloads if it's got enough cooling and power.
True.
So, which is similar to where the RTX 2080 boosts up to, but I think it typically boosts up closer to about 1900 to 1850 in gaming workloads. That'll be interesting if this part is real and comes out. If it actually is 10 to 15% faster. I could see being closer to 10, but I don't know about 15. That's a little high.
Well, regardless, if it does wind up being a sufficient value compared to the RTX 2070, it could provide a counterpoint to AMD's Navi GPU.
Well, it depends on the Navi pricing.
Yep. That's what it'll come down to, is who wins the price war.
Yep. Because the Turing features really are not getting adopted very well in the gaming market. As far as software.
And so NVIDIA is not resting on its laurels, though. We have the first reliable leak about their upcoming Ampere generation of GPUs coming in 2020. These apparently are going to be built on Samsung's 7-nanometer EUV process, because it turns out Samsung outbid TSMC. And so the reason we have this information is due to a leak. Excuse me. And so this was originally leaked due to their EEC certification, where we have information that they're supposed to be able to launch in 2020, again, on the 7-nanometer EUV process.
So, from what I understand, the 7 nanometer EUV process by Samsung is good, but it's not quite as good as TSMC's 7 nanometer, which will be used in all of AMD's products for this year. The transistor count and the bins are just slightly better, or the transistor density is slightly better in the TSMC process, but I think they're pretty competitive with each other overall. So later on in this article, it does seem to indicate more context as to why NVIDIA chose Samsung, not just based on pricing, but the fact that Samsung would probably be in a better position to prioritize NVIDIA over other potential clients, whereas TSMC is most likely going to be prioritizing other clients over NVIDIA, or at least balancing them out. So,
Yep, we'll have to see how that goes, especially with Samsung having just licensed some of AMD's tech
right.
for their mobile chips. And now Samsung also partnering with NVIDIA to produce their GPUs on their 7 nanometer EUV node. Samsung knows how to play both ends against the middle, it seems.
Well, Samsung's basically just going to be leasing out their factory capacity is all they're doing.
Right.
You know, they wouldn't be licensing NVIDIA tech like they are from AMD. You know, they could do whatever they want with that R&D tech for their own purposes. So that's a little bit different, but it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think there's been rumors that NVIDIA is going to be moving to a 7 nanometer process sometime soon. And this kind of confirms all of the rumors that we've been hearing that they'd be moving to 7 nanometer sometime next year. So it's heating up, boys.
Indeed it is.
It's heating up.
Indeed it is.
We got Navi, we got Intel coming out next year.
Yep, that we do. And with that,
You can AMD E3.
what
What's
was that,
that,
Hunter?
And AMD E3 coming next Monday.
Indeed.
Oh,
With the
yeah,
E3 announcement on Monday,
Yep.
we'll find out more about Navi then. All right, that brings us to the end of the show, unfortunately. But we do have a couple other things to talk about in our hardware deals. So this week we got 3 hardware deals for you.
Deers?
One, yeah. Did I mention I'm tired?
I'm tired too, man. I'm so tired.
They don't stand in front of you.
Indeed.
Look at me.
So we've got 3 different deals this week. 1 for RAM and 2 for SSDs. One is a budget high-capacity drive, and the other one, well, is also a high-capacity drive, but it's a little less budget than the other one. So I wanted to share both of these, as well as this. This deal is very similar to the one we had last week, but with a different brand of RAM. This is the Gale Evo Potenza 16 gigabyte DDR4 3000 kit. It's got the fancy red heat spreaders, and it is $64.99 for the next 6 days from the time that we record this. So by the time you see this, you'll likely have 5 days still to purchase this. If you missed the deal last week, get on this one, because 16 gigabytes of DDR4 3000 for $65 is perfect for literally any system you want to build right now. It worked great with Ryzen and Infinity Fabric. It works fine with Intel as well. And for $65, you can't beat that price. You just can't.
No, you can't. That's a crazy deal.
All right. So for our budget SSD deal, we have an ADATA Ultimate SU650. This is a 2.5-inch SATA drive with a 960 gigabyte capacity, so nearly a whole terabyte, for $83.99. Now,
I think this is probably the best deal in this stack. I mean, the RAM deal's really good, but a 960 gig SSD for $84 or $85, that's crazy, man.
yeah, we have seen cheaper 1 terabyte drives, but they've all been super low-end budget drives from the like of Light or L5 or some other off-brand. This is ADATA, which is a solid brand, for $84. Now, the SU650 is not one of their high-end drives. It is an entry-level budget drive. In fact, if you scroll down, they say first SSD, great timing. Basically, they're saying this is for the person who has not had an SSD before and wants to experience the difference from going from a hard drive to an SSD. And if we go into the spec, we see this is the case. This is not a super fast drive. We see that it has max sequential reads between 500 and 520 megabytes per second. By the way, this is one thing I will commend ADATA on, is to show you speeds from 3 different expected benchmark utilities for SSD.
Oh, nice.
Benchmark, CDM, and ASSD. And notice for max sequential writes, 440 to 450 megabytes per second. Again, not the highest speed you'd expect even from SATA drive, but if you're looking for a games drive in your mid-range build, or just wanting to have SSD speeds on storage drive, this is how you do it.
Well, and this SU650 drive's been around for a while, and it's very reliable. And honestly, the read speed is not far away from really fully saturating a SATA cable. So,
is the case. I've seen faster drives in the past, and we've featured those.
oh yeah.
But this is not intended to be a parts drive. This is a solid, dependable drive designed for daily use. And you can tell that by this little figure. Terabytes written. It is guaranteed to write 500 terabytes worth of information. That means you could write the whole drive over almost 600 times.
Well, and it's a terabyte drive. It's terabyte SSD just about for $83.99. Right?
Now, not all the reviews for it are great. You'll notice some people had really great experiences. A number didn't. Very few in the middle. This is pretty common with budget drives. You can see some people, it died on them quickly, but a lot of people had no problems. So, admittedly, on something at this price point, yes, you are taking a little bit of a chance. But in my experience, data has been reliable. I've been using SSDs from them in budget builds for years. And the SU650 at this price point, at worst, you RMA it.
Right. Because more than likely you've already got a drive that is working. So,
but if you need more storage room than that, you need more than 960 gigabytes, and you want NVMe speeds, dang it. Well, Amazon has the Intel 660p M.2 2 terabyte variant for $199.99.
oh, this drives me nuts. I really want to get this drive, man.
Me too.
Yes, that's significantly more money, but it's an NVMe drive, and It has random read and random write performance of right around 220,000 IOPS. Specifically, Intel doesn't like to give the speeds on this drive because it is one of the slower NVMe drives. It's a budget drive. It has QLC NAND flash, but the controller is solid, and it's one of the cheapest ways to get 2 terabytes of NVMe speed SSD on the market.
Well, the 1 terabyte price is not that far off from the SU. Honestly.
Yeah. We've featured the 1 terabyte drive in the past when it's gone near or below $100. It's still, last week we featured a deal on the 1 terabyte model from Newegg where it was being on sale for around $91. But even at its normal sale price of $104.99, the 1 terabyte model is still a pretty solid deal if you have NVMe capable motherboards.
Mm-hmm. Which most modern motherboards that have come out over the last few years should support.
Basically, if you have anything from about 2013 to 2015 forward, you've probably got NVMe.
Well, or an M.2 slot.
At the very least.
Yeah.
And with that, gentlemen, I'm afraid we've reached the end. Is there anything else either of you would like to add?
Just looking forward to seeing the reviews on Ryzen 7 or the Ryzen 3000 parts and Navi. Just waiting to see what the reviewers say about the stuff.
Yep. Me too.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed the content you've seen here, of course, you can check us out you can also check out the playlist for all the other TechForge episodes, as well as all the other content we have here on our YouTube channel. You can also check us out at all of your favorite social media hangouts. Check us out on Facebook at the CrossForge Gaming Community. You can also find us on Twitter at CrossForge Games, as well as a link down below in the description to our Discord community. In the meantime, I've been Dynamo Ned. This has been TechForge. And remember, when life has you down, Jesus loves you, and forge on.